This is the way.
This is the way.
Hey, welcome back to ScreenCrush. I'm Arey, and this is all of the Easter eggs, references, and little things you might have missed in The Mandalorian Season 3, Episode 3, The Convert. Holy crap, this was one of the best episodes I've ever seen of this show. It combined the political intrigue from shows like Andor, the dogfight felt like something straight out of one of the movies, and it moved the overall story of The Mandalorian to a new phase. So I cannot wait to break this down and explain how all of this is carefully laying the groundwork for the rise of the First Order, and it shows us exactly why the New Republic failed. So let's get into these Easter eggs. Now, one thing I really want to point out here.
Are you eating snacks in the middle of an Easter egg video? Person, we talked about this.
Yeah, sorry, I stress eat. It's really hard to stop.
Well, that's no excuse. You gotta find some way to stop stress eating and your oral fixation habits, or you're out of here, buddy.
Okay, I'll work on it. Now, back to what I was saying. The Star Wars intros before each Disney Plus show have been slightly different, with the Bad Batch featuring characters that are more from the Dave Filoni-produced shows, like Imperial Cadets and General Grievous, whereas the characters in the Mandalorian intros tend to be from the Favreau-produced shows. We have Vader, R2-D2, Fennec Shand, a TIE fighter pilot, Bo-Katan, an IG droid, a scout trooper, the armorer, and of course, the Mandalorian. The name of this episode is The Convert, which has a couple of different meanings. First, we have Pershing, who has been converted to the New Republic, but also, Elia Kane seems to be slowly converting him to the First Order, which I'll explain a little later on. And also, Bo-Katan seems to have her own religious conversion. Last episode, she saw the mythosaur, and she could not shake that image from her mind. It was a near mystical experience, something she couldn't explain.
A moment of clarity.
And by the end of the episode, she has been accepted back into the way. This season has been filled with religious subtext, including a baptism, a literal passage from the book of Exodus, and episodes called The Apostate and now The Convert. The question we'll talk about later is Bo-Katan really converted, or, like Elia Kane, is she just faking it to get what she wants?
So wait, what do you mean about the mythosaur?
Now, Doug, we talked about this last week, so I don't want to get too far into it, but basically, the mythosaur are these giant beasts that were native to Mandalore, and the earliest Mandalorians learned to ride them around and conquer the planet. This is why the mythosaur skull is the symbol of the Mandalorian. Now, for the most part, the Mandalorians believe they were extinct, except for one prophecy that the armorer already mentioned.
Songs of eons past foretold of the mythosaur rising up to herald a new age of Mandalore.
So the question we're going to talk about in just a bit is what this actually means for the Mandalorian people. Will this mythosaur literally rise up and help them take back their world? Will the people unite around Din Djarin as their leader since he has the Darksaber? It's also very interesting that Bo-Katan does not tell Din about the mythosaur. She asks him,
You see anything down there?
Now, I'm not sure if she's asking because she doesn't trust what she saw or if she wants to keep the secret to herself. You see, more than anything, Bo-Katan wants to be leader of Mandalore. She tried to retake the world, but because she didn't have the Darksaber, everybody abandoned her. So she must be thinking, is there a way that I can use this mythosaur myth to become ruler of my planet and save my people? Can I use the mythosaur to regain power?
Or maybe she's just in a state of spiritual confusion. Person, are you in a state of grace?
Yeah, I mean, maybe she really is just questioning everything she thought she knew about her people and about these old myths. She might be a genuine convert, but those are also questions that we're going to be asking about Pershing and Elia Kane throughout this episode. Okay, now hold on just one second.
Hey, what is that? Are you vaping on the job?
Oh, not at all. I just have a few oral fixation habits that I'm trying to kick, like the stress eating we mentioned earlier. This just gives my hands something to do when I'm feeling anxious.
Well, what is that?
Oh, this is a naturally diffusive device called Fume. They're the sponsor of this video. It uses plants and behavioral science to help you trade out your negative habit for a positive one.
Is it fun?
Actually, yeah, it's really nice. So instead of pods that are filled with potentially harmful chemicals like a vape, Fume uses these cores that are infused with plants like peppermint and cinnamon for delicious natural flavors.
But I don't smell anything, and I am a dog. I smell real good.
Yeah, dude, it's not a vape. It's not even electrical. Instead of vapor, Fume uses flavored air. Instead of harmful chemicals, Fume uses all natural blends like citrus. I thought it would be gross, but I was surprised at how good it tasted. My favorite flavor, the one in here, is crisp mint. Fume helps you to change your negative habits into positive habits. It also has an adjustable airflow and is designed with movable parts and magnets for fidgeting, giving my fingers a lot to do, which helps calm my anxiety. Fume wants to make switching easy for you and even fun. They have thousands of 5-star reviews from people who've changed their life and switched when other solutions just didn't work. So head to tryfume.com/ScreenCrush and use the code ScreenCrush to save 10% off when you get the Journey Pack today. The Journey Pack comes with 3 unique flavors and everything you need to finally be free of your bad habit. That's tryfum.com and use the code ScreenCrush to get an additional 10% off your order today. Back to the Easter eggs. So Din says that he didn't think there would be canyons like that, and Bo-Katan replies,
The bombings from the Purge must have triggered seismic activities.
And I think this explains where this mythosaur came from. In a great Clone Wars episode, the Republic sets off this electro bomb that opens up a huge underground cavern housing a Zillo beast. Like the mythosaur, the people native to this planet thought the Zillo beasts were extinct. So this Zillo beast, which is basically a kaiju, goes on to terrorize Coruscant, and actually they took it away to clone its DNA. That's a really cool possible connection to Pershing in this episode. So just like the Zillo beast was freed from a bombing, the same thing could have happened here. When the Imperials bombarded the planet, they might have opened up a chasm where the mythosaur was hibernating for centuries. Or maybe there's like hundreds of them living underground, like the Hollow Earth theory.
Like Skartaris?
Like Skartaris. High five.
Welcome to Skartaris.
Back on the Gauntlet, that's Bo-Katan's ship, Grogu gurgles whenever he sees danger is near, showing that his Jedi senses are attuned enough to detect a disturbance in the Force. Also, it occurred to me in this scene that you know what Grogu's first word should be?
Dad?
No, but that's really good. His first word should be, "This is the way."
Cool.
Right? High five. Then they are attacked by TIE interceptors. So these are a model of TIE fighter that are faster and more powerful than regular TIEs. We first saw them at the Battle of Endor, but I actually think that their first in-canon appearance, like on the timeline, was in the Rebels episode, The Antilles Extraction. Now, it's interesting that they're so close to Mandalore. At first I thought that maybe what's left of the Empire had laid claim to what's left of this planet, but then Bo-Katan said,
I've scoped off a lot of Imperial warlords.
and now a lot of stuff makes sense. After the Empire surrendered after the Battle of Jakku, a few scattered warlords tried to use forces that they commanded to rebuild the Empire. This is basically what Moff Gideon was doing back in Season 1 and 2. So because Mandalore is in the Outer Rim and it's basically a ruined planet that no one wants, this makes the system a perfect hiding spot for a warlord Star Destroyer, which could be where these TIEs have come from. It also explains who the hell Bo-Katan had to fight when she tried to retake Mandalore. Din tells her,
You tend to get mad when you hijack their ships.
which of course is how they met back in Season 2. So at first, Din is helping her in the dogfight by being a gunner, and I like the detail that the targeting systems on her ship seem to be somewhere between the technology of the Clone Wars and A New Hope. It makes sense, since the ship has been around a long time, but she would have presumably updated the system since the Clone Wars. Din gets back in his N1 starfighter from the Phantom Menace, which is awesome, but it also creates a lot of tension in this battle because he and Grogu are now separated. Now we know that neither of them are going to die, but there is a possibility that Bo-Katan could be forced to leave this system, or even captured, and then Din and Grogu would be split up again.
Yeah, well, I bet they'd just reunite on a different show or something, like maybe an episode of Doogie Howser.
Doogie Howser is not part of Star Wars. They can't be on that show.
Well, your mom isn't part of Star Wars, and she's on that every night.
It's a good effort. High five. Now, during the firefight, Din flies up and poses a lot like the Batwing in the 1989 Batman movie. But unlike in that movie, there's a real reason for Din to fly up and take this pose. It's so he can dive and then take out a TIE fighter. There's also a cool little detail here that after he blows up the TIE, he pulls up his nose just a bit to avoid the explosion. Normally in Star Wars, the fighters just fly straight through the explosion. And by the way, this sound sounds really familiar.
What's that flashing?
That was it. Last week, I complained a little bit about R5 being in this show and how much like a low-hanging fruit Easter egg that was. But I do really like that they've given him this fearful personality, like he's a mechanical cringeor.
I know I'm going to hate myself for this.
Man, this dogfight was so cool. It is as good as something that you would see in a Star Wars movie. I especially love this part where Bo-Katan basically executes a J-turn in mid-air and then does a zero-G drop. But that rush of victory is soon gone when she sees the TIE bombers, which we originally saw back in The Empire Strikes Back, and they're destroying her castle. By the way, I didn't notice this before, but the entrance to her castle looks a lot like the front of a Mandalorian helmet. Very cool.
I thought it was cool.
I don't give a what you think, Jerry.
Now the good news for Bo-Katan is apparently nobody else was living in that giant castle. Now this leaves Bo-Katan homeless, but not just because her literal home is gone. This castle was the seat of her house. It's where her heritage was tied to. It gave her purpose. Now she is in search of new heritage, new family, new purpose, which makes her story fit in so well with Dr. Pershing's. And then they're attacked by a huge squad of TIEs and they barely jump before they're overwhelmed. Reminded me of another classic Katie Sackhoff sci-fi show, Battlestar Galactica.
Bears beats Battlestar Galactica.
And then, oh man, we get to the good stuff. We go to Coruscant with this epic sweeping score. So I feel like I have to explain where Coruscant is at this point in history. As we all know, it was the seat of power in the galaxy for thousands of years. First it was the capital of the Old Republic, then the Republic, and then the Empire. But when the rebellion defeated the Empire, they wanted to be as different from the Empire as possible. They dismantled 90% of their military, relied on droids instead of a large bureaucracy, and essentially they created a Confederate decentralized government. This led to a lot of problems that we're going to talk about in a future video this week, so make sure you subscribe to make sure you don't miss that one. But for now, what you need to know is that the capital of the Republic was not on Coruscant. It rotated every few years. It started on Chandrilia, the home planet of Mon Mothma, and then it ended up on Hosnian Prime, which the First Order destroyed. Now, I don't think we know if Coruscant was ever the capital of the New Republic again, but it was a place where the wealthiest and most powerful people in the galaxy lived. See, the planet was largely untouched by the war, or the oppression of the Empire, and this is why a lot of people on the planet continued to support the Empire, or at least Imperial policies. After all, those policies kept them rich and in power. So the great novel Bloodline talks about how the Republic became split into two parties, the populace, who wanted a decentralized government, and the centrists, who wanted a more powerful central government. We're seeing the beginning of that divide in this episode, with the wealthy just wanting to stay in power and not really caring who's in charge.
Empire, Rebels, New Republic, I can't keep track.
In fact, we hear a similar line of thinking in The Last Jedi, when they talk about arms dealers just wanting constant war and not caring who actually wins.
Made his bank selling weapons to the bad guys. I'm the good.
So, this is a very cool Easter egg. Pershing is given a talk in the same opera house where Palpatine tempted Anakin to the dark side, giving Pershing a story that's parallel to Anakin Skywalker as he begins his slow descent toward evil. The exterior of the opera house is the same. The stairs are the same. There's actually George Lucas having a cameo in Revenge of the Sith, and the auditorium is exactly the same. Again, this is showing how on Coruscant, nothing really changes throughout these different regimes. The wealthy stay wealthy and in power. So, you all remember Pen Pershing. He's been with us since season 1. He was the clone geneticist who was taking the midichlorians from Grogu's blood.
What are midichlorians?
Midichlorians are a microscopic life form that resides within all living cells.
Now, I should note that he never was an Imperial officer. His guild, as noted by his patch, was a guild for cloners who worked for the Empire at Kamino and then on Mount Tantus like we saw in the Bad Batch. So it's not like he was ever in the military. His lack of an Imperial rank probably helped him accelerate through the Republic amnesty program. Now, we see all through earlier seasons that he has a soft heart and he looked out for Grogu.
Please don't hurt him. It's just a child.
And he was very quick to cooperate after he was captured. And here, I genuinely think he wants to do good and serve the Republic. In this speech, he says,
"My research was twisted at the behest of a desperate individual intent on using cloning technology to secure more power for himself."
And here he is talking about Moff Gideon, but we really know that Gideon is likely trying to clone Palpatine. This entire series is now showing the rise of the First Order and explaining this.
Somehow Palpatine returned.
Yeah, how'd that work anyways?
Well, basically the Emperor was able to keep his consciousness alive with Sith dark magic, and he needed the cloners to replicate a body for him that could also be Force sensitive. This is difficult because, as Qui-Gon explained,
"And the Force? Well, that's just microscopic bacteria in your bloodstream called midichlorians."
Now, I don't think that Pershing had any idea that he was trying to implant midichlorians into the body of a dead dictator. He genuinely wanted to do what was right. But this bureaucratic system of the New Republic is preventing that from happening. This is an excellent story that is showing us how somebody good can turn evil, which is basically the story of every Star Wars trilogy.
Yeah, this is good and all, but I wanted a lot more Grogu in this show.
Well, yeah, that's always good to see, but hey, if any of you would like a great alternative to Grogu, I have to show you something.
Not this again.
This is our brand new shirt of Doug as the child that you can get in our merch store at shopzeroedition.com.
I do not give my permission to use my likeness. I am being exploited.
And guys, we have lots of other cool shirts too, like our original trilogy t-shirt, Not the Bees, the Doug Father, and many more. Shopping our merch store is a great way to support our channel, so click out the link in the description to get yours today. High five.
No.
Suit yourself. So the Republic recruiting Imperial scientists might remind a lot of you of Arnim Zola in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Basically how S.H.I.E.L.D. recruited Hydra scientists after World War II. But that was actually based on a real thing. After World War II, the American government recruited Nazi scientists for Operation Paperclip, which helped us excel in the space race and basically got us to the moon, thank you Werner von Braun. But in the MCU, it turned out that Zola was always a Hydra plant, growing like a beautiful parasite inside of S.H.I.E.L.D. So I think that Kane is doing a similar thing here, helping to rebuild the Empire as the First Order from within the New Republic. In Pershing's speech, he mentions the groundbreaking work of the Kaminoans. These are the cloners who created the clone army during the Clone Wars, and we saw the Empire destroy their entire civilization and gut it for parts in Season 1 of The Bad Batch. Currently, in that show, the cloner Nala Se is imprisoned by the Empire on Mount Tantus, and the Empire is trying to get her to work on a secret project, probably this.
Somehow Palpatine returned.
But Pershing talks about how his work was not in replicating, it was in gene splicing, combining the DNA of two beings into one. So this is how, for instance, the cloners could use the Zillo Beast DNA to create armor, or how Pershing could take the midi-chlorian-rich blood of Grogu and graft it onto a clone body like Snoke, thereby making Snoke Force-sensitive, I guess. So on his way out, he says,
The first casts rejected the formula almost immediately.
And remember, this is basically what he said in a hologram recording back in Season 2.
Sadly, the body rejected the blood.
And this is also where he said,
I highly doubt we'll find a donor with a higher M count, though.
M count referring to the midi-chlorian count. Outside, Pershing is treated like a little darling by the Coruscant elite, including this aristocrat from Mon Cala. This reminded me of something that the ancient Romans did. Whenever they conquered a new land or tribe, they brought the leader back to Rome, where he would kneel before Caesar and tell the people about the new land that Rome had conquered. It was a way for the conquerors to bask in a feeling of superiority, and I think that's what we're seeing play out here. These wealthy people don't really care about Pershing or his work or the New Republic amnesty program. They're just delighted to see him bend the knee. Outside, there's a transport bus like we saw in Revenge of the Sith. Pershing's taxi is being driven by a droid that's modeled after Ralph McQuarrie's original concept art for C-3PO, and that concept art was based on Maria the robot from the classic sci-fi film Metropolis. Dead Tomato on Twitter reminded me that this same model droid was an infiltrator in Star Wars Rebels. He mentions
Isis blossoms,
which are a rare flower from Kashyyyk that we saw in the game Star Wars Galaxies, and he also mentions the Galactic Museum with a display on hyperdrive technology. So this is interesting because in episode 1 of this season we caught a glimpse of the Purrgil. These are essentially space whales from Star Wars Rebels that can travel through hyperspace, and the earliest hyperspace engines were developed by people who observed how the Purrgil traveled in this way. It's just interesting that we keep getting callbacks to that era in the background of this show.
Funny, yes, but not funny, haha. Funny weird.
He also mentions an extinct animal called the Mantog of Malastare, which, in the old Legends continuity, was a creature in the Star Wars role-playing game. Maybe the reason they're extinct in this show is because that old Legends continuity was wiped away by Disney's purchase of Lucasfilm. Oh, and Malastare is a Star Wars planet that has appeared all over the place and was name-dropped in The Phantom Menace right here.
The Congress of Malastare concurs with the Honorable Delegate from the Trade Federation.
But more importantly, it was the original home of the Zillo Beast. When Pershing approaches the ex-Imperials, one of them says Poodoo. Filthy, filthy, filthy Star Wars curse word that we first heard here. So then Pershing arrives at his amnesty housing, which is part of the New Republic rehabilitation program. Now I should note that rehabilitation was the norm in the Old Republic, especially during the High Republic era. The audio play The Tempest Runner is all about Lorna D, a space pirate, going through this program and almost being rehabilitated. But that program was built on actual, real counseling, where inmates spoke to a human being, whereas this program is more dehumanizing. Everyone is given a number.
Amnesty Officer M34.
Amnesty Scientist, L52.
And forced to communicate with a droid parole officer instead of a person who actually cares about them.
Are you experiencing any undue stress due to work or personal matters?
No.
This is a metaphor for all the overworked bureaucratic social workers who are so numb to their jobs that they might as well be robots.
I think I told you I'm pursuing a career in stand-up comedy.
No, you didn't.
I think I did.
They toast.
Long live the New Republic.
As they're introduced around the table, Pershing recognizes Elia Kane.
I didn't expect to see anyone from Moff Gideon's ship here.
Yeah, where do we know her from?
Actually, you might recently know her because she was Jentora, the rebel leader in Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania. But she also first appeared in The Mandalorian Season 2, Episode 4, where we saw her reporting straight to Moff Gideon. And I'm betting that she is still working for Gideon in this episode, but I'm going to explain that later on. Notice how Gideon's name still carries a lot of fear.
I heard he escaped en route to the War Tribunal.
So this is a subtle way of showing that they don't believe that the New Republic can deliver justice. Den's Covert expressed the same doubts in an earlier episode.
Then he will be executed for his crimes by the New Republic Tribunal.
We shall see.
They also mentioned a rumor that the New Republic has used this as a cover story to hook Gideon up to a mind flayer. In a subtle way, this is showing how people naturally expect the New Republic to behave like the Empire, also secretly torturing people. And also, a mind flayer is a villain from Stranger Things, based on a monster from D&D, but also it's very similar to the tentacle monster that tortured Riz Ahmed in Rogue One. They talk about things that they miss, and after Pershing mentions the yellow biscuits, Kane says,
"Gotta say though, I like the red ones."
And Blue Bantha Milk on Twitter, who has a really cool podcast you should check out, had a great observation about this. She likes the red biscuit, she eats red ice cream, all subtle indications that she is working secretly to restore the Sith. Pershing is listening to a factoid about Coruscant. And notice how it says one of the few planets that are completely covered with a city, meaning there are a few others out there, like Hosnian Prime, the capital that the First Order destroyed in The Force Awakens. And of course, the idea of a planet being covered with a city is lifted from Isaac Asimov's Foundation trilogy, which is now a really good series on Apple TV. Then Kane leaves him a box of biscuits. Note the Imperial seal on them. Food is often used as a symbol of temptation. You have the snake tempting Eve to eat from the Tree of Knowledge, the witch tempting Edmund to eat a Turkish delight in The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, and here we see Pershing begin to compromise his principles for a little bit of wafer.
See, you can tell these are evil biscuits because they have an Imperial sticker.
Yes, and by the way, the lid of that box sure does look like a Star Wars crate, doesn't it? Pershing's job seems only slightly less soul-crushing than Cyril Karn's cubicle in Andor. A Twi'lek is delivering his workload, which looks a lot like a J.D. Power and Associates award. She says,
"Happy Bendu Day."
So I get the feeling that this is not a holiday, but instead just a day of the week. Bendu is a really old Star Wars reference. In George Lucas's original draft of Star Wars, the Jedi were called the Jedi Bendu. And in Star Wars Rebels, Kanan was mentored by a very ancient Force being called Bendu. So something about the Bendu did persist throughout the millennia to become a day of the week, similar to how Thursday was originally called Thor's Day and Wednesday was Odin's Day. You get the idea. Notice there's another astromech droid that's painted exactly like R5, but it's painted yellow so the kids at home won't get confused. ATG Cast on Twitter, another good podcast, pointed out that when Kane and Pershing are at the fair, the music playing is March of the Resistance from The Force Awakens. And Blue Bantha Milk also pointed out that the music is diegetic, meaning that it's actually playing in the square. This is similar to how the Imperial March was rearranged and used in-universe in the show Rebels and in Solo for the purposes of Imperial propaganda. Shout out to Brent of Grogu on Twitter, who told me that the magician in this scene is Dean Kendi, the cinematographer for this episode, and the creature he's unveiling has these head fins that pop out, a lot like this. Also in the square, we got a family of Rodians and a droid on stilts juggling. So then we get something rare in this show, a chance for a couple characters to just talk about their lives and express how the current state of the galaxy makes them feel. Pershing is happy to be free of the Empire, but he misses his research. For him, there's a kind of purity to science. It's neither good nor evil, it just depends on its application. It's very similar to a character named Gail Bedecker from Breaking Bad and Better Call Saul.
I love the lab.
They talk about how they thought they were doing good, and we've seen this sentiment repeated with other former Imperials like Iden Versio in Battlefront 2. Some people who served the Empire genuinely thought they were bringing order to the galaxy because they bought into this Imperial propaganda.
Destroying your planet was a small price to pay to rid the galaxy of terrorism.
Pershing says,
"The ethics of cloning are complicated."
And actually, we're seeing these same ethical dilemmas playing out in seasons of The Bad Batch. So The Bad Batch is set just after Order 66 when the clones are being decommissioned. Some senators are fighting for a pension for the clones.
You now wish to discard them, leave them with nothing. Is that how we repay them for their service?
While most Imperial officers just see them as tools or obsolete units.
More clones.
Problem, sir?
Yes. I don't like used equipment.
So the ethical discussion is, can you bring a new life into the world if that life cannot have a right to exist as a citizen? And then Kane kind of spells out the argument for the growing centrist movement.
The New Republic is trying their best, but they're struggling.
The people who formed the centrist party are not all former Imperials, but they saw merit in the Imperial system of control. I think that we're going to see Imperial moles like Kane exploit that thought to create a new schism inside the New Republic. The two of them are in Monument Plaza next to Utane Peak, the only uncovered land on Coruscant, the top of its highest mountain. Now, Monument Plaza has appeared all over Star Wars. As the Duchess of Light on Twitter reminds us, in the High Republic era, they placed greenery around this peak to reflect its natural beauty. But by the time we see it in the Clone Wars, it pretty much looks like it does here. And there's also a Mandalorian connection in Clone Wars to this spot. It is where Duchess Satine met Obi-Wan when she was framed for a crime. And Satine is the sister of Bo-Katan Kryze. Padme also gave a speech that was broadcast in this spot. And remember how the special edition of Return of the Jedi showed the celebration on Coruscant after the Empire fell? Well, in Chuck Wendig's novel Aftermath, it's revealed that immediately after we saw that celebration, the Imperials cracked down on the protest and started a riot. And that happened here in Monument Plaza. But I don't think this is in this episode just as a fun Easter egg. I think this is a way to show how natural human ability has been buried beneath government bureaucracy. It's showing that scientists like Pershing are being prevented from reaching the top, just like he's not allowed to touch the mountain peak.
Please refrain from physical contact with
So
roommates.
sorry.
And tragedy, he loses that ice cream.
What you say?
Then he goes on to see his parole droid who, like I said, doesn't care about him at all. It's just serving a bureaucratic function. If this were a human counselor, then maybe Pershing would feel comfortable voicing his concerns. Also, the building bears the New Republic crest that we see throughout the episode. So then Kane begins to tempt him.
We can get you a mobile lab station, but it would require going outside our designated perimeter.
And then at work, he's being forced to decommission perfectly good tech just because it belonged to the Empire. There's another metaphor here for himself and for his actual work. Just because it was being used for evil doesn't mean that he couldn't use that same technology to save the lives of people like his mother. But again, we're seeing a parallel here with Anakin Skywalker, who broke the rules to save the woman he loved.
Know the power of the dark side. Power to save Padme.
His boss also says that they're decommissioning the old Alliance fleet. That is part of the 90% rollback in the military that's going to leave the New Republic vulnerable to the rise of the First Order. So, much like Anakin Skywalker, Pershing tells himself a lie, that he is doing this for the greater good. At the train station, these Arabesh letters foreshadow the problems they're going to have on the train. It reads, Federal Station, Executive Building, Monument Park, and finally the small print reads, the public transit system of Coruscant has a zero-tolerance policy on its rules and restrictions. Report all violations immediately. So this is really showing how these amnesty people are second-class citizens. Travel is restricted, they stay in lousy housing, and worst of all, they're only identified as a number. The guards are wearing the same New Republic security uniforms that we saw in the Season 1 Prison Outbreak episode. On the train, we can see a reflection of an Arabash datapad, which is blurry and backwards, but we were able to just make out letters that say this is your mom. And that's how it's done. High five.
No.
Fine. By the way, everyone, follow us on TikTok and Instagram for short videos of me and Doug having fun just like this. Links are in the description. So, on the train, Kane says,
Songs days, am I right?
Now, this is another deep-cut Easter egg from the Legends continuity that is now hopping over to the new Disney continuity. The Tongs appeared in the Knights of the Old Republic comic book. They were the original inhabitants of Coruscant. But get this, they also have strong ties to the Mandalorians. In those now non-canon comics, Mandalore the First led the Tongs to the planet Mandalore, and they conquered it and became some of the very first Mandalorians. Also, the Beskad, a traditional Mandalorian sword, was based on an ancient Tong design. Now, back to the episode where Pershing and Kane are visiting a yard where Imperial relics like themselves are being deconstructed. This is happening in the old industrial area where Darth Sidious hid out during the Clone Wars. It's basically always a place that has evil in it.
Tickets, please.
Some tickets please robots come by, combining this gag from Indiana Jones,
Tickets, please.
and this guy from Rick and Morty.
Jesus, the tickets please guy is cut!
But the most horrifying tickets please guy of all is this one. Kane continues to tempt Pershing to take risks, getting him to make a dangerous jump and then watching him enjoy the adrenaline rush that he got from it. The channel heavy spoilers pointed out that the train cars are held together with energy binders just like the pods in the pod race. Quite a few people on Twitter pointed out that Pershing's coat seems like an homage to Deckard's in Blade Runner, and Pershing even does his own version of the Voight Kampff test where he is interviewed by a machine. Two characters sneaking aboard an old Imperial ship to scavenge for parts reminds me of what all this is leading to. Rey exploring a wrecked Star Destroyer in The Force Awakens. Also, I think this ship is an Imperial II class Star Destroyer. If I'm wrong, let me know down in the comments, nerd. On this little caper, the two of them share their real names.
Elia Kane, Communications Officer.
Dr. Penn Pershing.
So this is usually used as a way to build trust, but also to reveal your true nature, who you really are. Except here, Kane already knows Pershing's name because she was Gideon's right hand, and she is obviously lying to him about who she really is. And also, her name, Kane, calls back to another biblical story, this one about Cain and Abel. Cain killed his brother Abel and was cursed to walk the earth.
You know, like Cain in Kung Fu.
Pershing enters the lab like Belle seeing the library for the first time. He says,
You always knew what you wanted to do.
As far back as I can remember.
And guys, I kind of think this is a reference to Henry Hill's first line in Goodfellas.
As far back as I can remember, I always wanted to be a gangster.
Both stories are about a person who starts off with lofty goals and has a fall from grace because he fell in with the wrong guys. When he asks about how Kane entered the Empire, she says,
I didn't really have a chance to think about it.
Maybe she was a child soldier, or an orphan drafted in against her will, or maybe she is in fact a clone. So then they're found out and they run away. And you know how you know these idiots were trying to get caught? They leave their flashlights on. That's how Forrest Gump caught the Watergate burglars.
And they must be looking for a fuse box or something, because them flashlights, they're keeping me awake.
When they get nabbed, the Arabesh on the space helicopter reads police. So then Pershing wakes up strapped to a New Republic gurney. Now we're going to talk about this more in our New Republic video, but these are the same tactics that the Empire would have used.
That you're cooperating fully.
It's repeat listenings that cause the most damage.
But now we see the Republic has tried to appropriate them with a new coat of paint. This is also very similar to how characters are treated in the novel 1984 and in the brilliant film Brazil. After a rebellious person is caught, they're strapped down and forced into being reconditioned. So this is an old Imperial mind flayer that Pershing recognizes immediately.
This is a mind flayer.
But this Mon Cala scientist says,
"This isn't the Empire, son. This device is used to heal. I've been through the treatment myself, in fact, and I found the experience quite refreshing."
Cara Dune even mentioned this device in Season 1.
I'm a rebel shock trooper. They'll upload me to a mind flayer.
And then, look, you have to love the delicious reversal of this.
It was a trap.
Now, of course, it's a callback to this.
Somehow Palpatine returned.
Sorry, I meant this.
It's a trap!
Having a human saying this to a Mon Cala is more than just an Easter egg. It's showing how the values of the New Republic have become inverted. What started off as an idealistic rebellion has now become a weak, corruptible government. Afterwards, a Twi'lek commissioner gives Kane an attagirl.
It's nice to know that for every failure, there's a success, like you.
And we see her dialing up the torture to Imperial levels.
Yeah, why is she doing that?
Well, it could be for a few reasons. One, it's revenge for him betraying Moff Gideon.
Where's the child being held?
This is the brig. He's being held here under armed guard.
2, because she likes to torture people. Or 3, she's trying to radicalize Pershing against the New Republic, so he'll rejoin the Empire to help clone Palpatine.
Dark science. Cloning. Secrets only the Sith knew.
So then we go back to the Mandalorian covert where Paz Vizsla sees Bo-Katan and calls her Night Owl. Now this of course is the name of her sect of Mandalorians, but also Bo-Katan was once a follower of Pre-Vizsla, who is related to Paz Vizsla. I'm gonna guess they're cousins? I don't think they've ever actually said. Appropriately, they are both voiced by Mandalorian creator Jon Favreau. The Armorer takes the living waters and pours them into a cooling pool, and we've seen her do this before, but we never knew what the liquid was for or where it was from. Now we see that every piece of Mandalorian armor is tempered by these living waters. This means that this water is a precious resource to these people. And inadvertently, Bo-Katan is redeemed and finds a place to belong.
Welcome, Bo-Katan of Clan Kryze.
Sometimes you wanna go.
Now, I am very curious to see what happens next. Is she actually a true believer? Does she see the Mythosaur as a spiritual guide for her? Or is she just going to use these people for her own ends? To foreshadow this big choice, we cut to a shot of the Beskar Mythosaur skull. And just a reminder, everybody, to change your bad habits today, try out Fume with our link in the description. But let me know what you think of all this. Let me know in the comments below or at me on Twitter. And if it's your first time here, please subscribe and smash that bell for alerts. For ScreenCrush, I'm Ryan Arey.